Hey everyone, I'm superphiz. You might know me from ETHStaker, from my work with client diversity on the Ethereum beacon chain, and from ETH Finance, Twitter, whatever. I am here with Pablo, and Pablo is. We just kind of realized we do a lot of the same thing. Pablo works with a staking foundation, and through that he does research into Diva, and also joined by my friend William Bailey, who is here mostly just to learn from what we're doing. So Pablo, welcome. I'm excited to chat with you today and learn more about Diva.
Hey, happy to have you. Happy you're having me.
So can you, we, I know a very high level, you work for the staking foundation, but you do research
hmm
that applies to Diva. Is that a fair
hmm
assumption?
Yeah, that's right. So Diva is a staking protocol, and we're three co-founders, kind of. But what we decided when it became a DAO is, look, a lot of people are like kind of imposing their decisions and their points of view on the protocol. So I decided to step out and actually be doing more pure research and pure education from outside. So I have no control over the protocol. What I do is I try to educate people, I try to connect people, making proposals, and make sure that everything kind of goes together. So yeah, I'm kind of a proposer and a bystander in many ways.
Interesting. So as an educator, what would you describe as your foundation of education? Like I would say mine is decentralizing
Mhm,
the beacon chain. What would you say is your
mhm.
foundation?
I would say is increasing accessibility because I think a lot of people could benefit from staking and could participate, but they just don't know where to start. So I think we touched on that point, right, with eStaker and all the education you've been doing, but I focus more on the user experience. Like, why would you do it? How do you actually do it? What things do you click on, and how do you make it super simple?
Yeah, so and I have to confess, I don't recall if I've seen it, but I've heard that Diva has a really nice interface. Is that accurate? Would you
Yeah.
support that?
Yeah. I did a lot of the mockups for that.
Good. So uh Diva. So we get the idea. You're
hmm
interested in increasing accessibility to staking. I'm interested
hmm
in decentralization. Those kind of
hmm
meet at the axis of by increasing access to staking for every individual, it also increases
hmm
decentralization of the beacon chain. Is that right?
That's right.
So can you tell us what is Diva?
So Diva stands for distributed validation, and it's a liquid staking protocol that allows you to, if you just want to liquid stake, you can just liquid stake. But where Diva is different is in the validation layer. So instead of validating with centralized party like an exchange, or with a small group like Lido, which has about 30 entities, or Rocket Pool, which has thousands of entities, I feel like there's still a 10x potential for bringing more people online by reducing the cost to entry. So today, the most accessible solution is Rocket Pool, which for just 10 ETH, you can run a node, but that's still pricing out a lot of people. And the reason for those 10 ETH is because somebody's still holding that key and they need to cover the potential damages that they can cause. But what we do with distributed validation is we split that key into 16 smaller parts, and then each of them is much cheaper, has much lower risk, and kind of is operating as a team. It's kind of team validation. You're doing it not alone, but together with a network of peers.
And I do want to slip one thing in there because I have followed Rocket Pool so closely. Rocket Pool is
hmm
fully smart contract to smart contract, so there is no key
hmm
holder. But I do
hmm
acknowledge that they regard the RPL token as kind of a backstop insurance plan.
hmm
Um, so with Diva, no individual holds
hmm
they don't hold the public key for
hmm
validating. They hold a shard of it. Is that right?
That's right. And maybe it's easier if I show, let me try to share my screen. So the core idea is there is distributed validation out there, like SSV and OBO, but they're focused at a different level. They're focused on how do you split that key and how do you operate it. What Diva does is more of a vertically integrated approach where it's about liquid staking, but you're powering the distributed validators. So maybe just to kind of show different architectures, one would be with Lido, what they're doing is they're generating this rotation of keys, and those are being operated by different entities who hold, in the end, a lot of keys. Like each operator in Lido is holding about 1% of all the staked ETH in the network, which is a big responsibility. And there's also risks to that, right? Once you reach the 33% critical threshold, that becomes potentially a cartel. Like it has the potential to become a cartel. I'm not saying it would, but it's something that could happen. And when we're talking about this settlement layer that needs to have the best security in the world, that's a risk, right? So what I would like to see is a diverse ecosystem of a lot of different solutions with different risk profiles. In this case, we're saying, okay, we're getting keys to different people and we're kind of trusting them. It's proof of authority in that sense. And in that sense, you have a zero ETH cost of attack. It's more reputational, but it's still something where you have this leap of faith, right? I think what Rocket Pool did amazingly well is they created these cryptoeconomic incentives, and they said, well, everybody's going to post a bond of 8 ETH or 16 ETH per mini pool, but in the current incarnation, these validator keys are still operated by one entity. So if that person goes offline, or if, a lot of my friends don't stake because they're like, I'm going to go on holidays for a couple of weeks. It's going to be super stressful. And it's something holding back a lot of people. So what we said is, well, what's possible if we break this key and instead of giving it to one person and making them the ultimate responsible, we make it more like a team. So what Diva does is it breaks that key into a network. And I'll just jump here to what's a good representation. Okay, this is a lot of detail maybe. But the way it works is each validator in Diva is run by 16 different keys that are given to different nodes. So each one has like a team or a committee of keys operating a validator. And that means that because it operates with a supermajority, you only need 2/3 to be online. And that means that multiple nodes can go offline without having any impact on the network. And that's something that's kind of new. We still need to figure out how exactly these duties are distributed, how do we penalize people who are offline, and so on. But it's super exciting because if you think about it, if we could divide those 10 ETH that we have from Rocket Pool between a lot of smaller nodes, that means the cost goes down. And then second, if we can make the chances of going offline much lower, and I have a great visual for this, we could also encourage a lot more people to come online. So I'm just going to end with this image, but imagine you have these 16 nodes, right? And they're operating as a team. We say, this team will work as long as less than 5 people are offline. So 11 of them. And now you have this team, which is kind of terrible team. Most people are offline 1/20th of the time, so 5% downtime. But still, if you look at the aggregate performance of the team, they never go offline. And that's really the power that you have with DBT, that although it's much more complicated, it does have the benefit that it can turn this team, individual low performers, into a very strong 99.99 uptime team.
That's great. So that gives me two quick questions, and they may be off topic, but I'm going to allow myself to be a little off.
Sure.
I know that there was discussion about the size of the DBT element, how many keys would be distributed, and are you telling me that 16 people will need to deposit 1 ETH to create 16 Diva tokens? Is that, or 16 ETH in liquidity for Diva tokens? Is that right?
So almost the way it works is each validator has 16 keys. And what we're asking at this point is each one will put 1 ETH. So in that sense, it's an aggregate of 16 ETH collateralizing a validator. Now, I think it's possible to have a little bit less just to make it more favorable for operators. But we're going to start with something super conservative. And I think I will personally be proposing, hey, if we can push it a little bit, then we can lower the price country, and that's good for everyone. But yeah, in a rough sense, you're matching 50% from stakers plus 50% from operators.
Okay. I have to confess that I love that, because I am ultra conservative when it comes to beacon chain security. And so seeing 16 keys, even if it's just the start, makes me delighted. If it goes down to 8, I'll be okay. If it goes less than that, I think that my red flags will go up. It's probably likely to. I don't obviously I don't control Diva, but 16 just makes me very excited. I actually preferred Rocket Pool's 16 ETH validators just for the skin in the game that the node operator had to provide. But I do recognize that limits liquidity of an LST. My other question is, and this is kind of a naive attack, so I'm confident you've thought through it, but just I'd like to hear about it. If I, as an attacker, am able to make deposits that give the majority share of a Diva validator, could I act maliciously? So could I use, in this case, I guess if we're 16, how many signatures would I need for 16?
You would need 11. So
Okay.
11 out of 16 would be
If I had
two-thirds.
11, could I then control 32 Ether?
Statistically, yes. You will have the certainty because you need to have always the right validators. But yeah, that would be the worst case attack that can happen in that case is a griefing attack. So you will control everything and you will just start slashing and hope that you're as effective as possible. And the full attack works like this. You would have to borrow the liquid staking token. Then you would need to short it. So you need to sell it short. And then you need to cause enough damage to make up for it. So there is a limit of at what point that attack becomes profitable, and another one of, what's the cost of that attack, and that's where the security elements come from. So I personally feel quite confident. I will be sharing some of the research I've done, but I think it would be very, very irrational to attack in such a scenario. So that's where the security limit comes.
From a griefing perspective, the most impact that the attacker could do is a slashing, which is likely to be a 1 ETH penalty for the validator. So that's not terrible grief. Is that correct?
That's totally correct. And actually, I'm about to write a Twitter thread. Maybe I can share that with you and get your opinion, because I was just writing today this minority kind of client thread. Let me pull it. But the idea here is the correlation risk of the protocol grows the bigger the protocol is. So if something like Lido would slash all their validators simultaneously, they would lose 100% of their ETH because of the correlation penalty, right? And Nixo had a great tweet about this the other day, and I was surprised at how many people got it wrong. That if you're running the majority client and everybody double signs, how much do you lose? And the right answer was you lose everything. So I was writing something here like a diverse Ethereum is like a forest imbalance, how it's important to have these smaller pieces and yeah, the maximum briefing you can extract depends on how big you are. And that's why it's so important for liquid staking protocols to stay in a feasible range that feels safe for everyone, because as you get bigger, the risk just increase. Yeah. So yeah, super important to consider things like this.
I want to jump in that I don't think any of us, well, I am not anti-Lido. I don't assume that you're anti-Lido. I am concerned about entities that pose an outsized risk to the beacon chain. And Lido, I believe in its current manifestation, does present that outsized risk. If one operator, as diligent as they may be, but if they get compromised, and someone is able to access their systems and cause that mass slashing against them, it's a significant loss. When they have, so that would be essentially 1% of beacon chain validators could be lost by one attack against one operator. That's just a risk that I think you and I agree is too high for us to accept.
I agree, and I'm with you. Like I like a lot of the team. I think they do great research. And for me, the only issue is that they're at a level where it's a systemic risk. And if you look just at 1%, so 1% would be around this range, that's fine because it would just be a 3% loss. But if it starts growing more, like it just gets to a range where it's not feasible. And that's one of the things, right, of why governance, like what might be the role of governance in a protocol like Diva. So when we think about Diva, we think it should be immutable. Like it should be this vertical stack that you just know how it's going to work. But I think there's an argument that some parameters might need to be modified through governance, just the minimum amount, because it's not the same to be in this range where some risks are non-existent than to be in this range where the risks are major and maybe systemic. So I think that's the only point where I can see the necessity to kind of adapt to the environment. But apart from that, we'd like this to be as immutable and governance minimized as possible.
Is that it sounds like because we had talked about this once before, and I know that you were not convinced either way. It sounds like you're more willing to limit Diva's growth to something that's responsible to the network. Is that what you're saying now?
Well, what I'm saying is I wouldn't feel comfortable if it became anything around the 30% range. I think there should be some mechanism to either disincentivize strongly, becoming too big, or maybe even have a limit. We haven't discussed those yet. What I'm doing now is I'm kind of working on the risk analysis and so on. And once we understand that really well, because it's not the same, the risk on DVT than the risk without DVT. Like it's fundamentally different. It gets better, but it also gets worse. In some cases, like you were saying, like you only need 2/3 of the keys. So I think we really need DVT native analysis, and hopefully, yeah, we'll be releasing that in a few months.
So those were the big sticking questions for me. Would you like to guide us through some resources?
Sure. So let's see. Maybe to comment on where we are. So these are the resources I personally maintain from the Staking Foundation. It explains kind of the whole protocol, how it works for stakers and operators, how the distributed validation works. So this is a great place to kind of get an idea of the protocol. I assume a lot of people listening to you are going to be operators. So what we have coming now is the Diva operator testnet is practically ready. There's a few people installing it privately. So the way it works is a Diva operator is a kind of extension of an Ethereum node. So if you're running an Ethereum node, it kind of sits on top like the Web3 signer. And the release is going to happen probably this week. So if you're interested in running one, you'll be able to run it from a Docker image or connecting to your existing node if you already have a fancy setup. But basically, we'd love to get people to come and play with it. I personally tried it with Geth and Teku. There's going to be more client combinations. You'll be able to choose anything you want. For example, Nimbus is really excited to launch something. Hopefully, we can get that on ARM at some point. But this is where we are in the roadmap. The current version creates validators with fully automatic DKG, which means there's no key management. You don't need to generate keys or like activate them. It will be fulfilling the validation duties, but it will not have yet things like withdrawals, zero knowledge oracles, tokenomics on the collateral and reward management or MAP. So there's still a way to go. And yeah, if anybody here is an operator and would like to play with it, I'd love to see that. And I just want to show you one of the first validators. This was created a few hours ago, so it's really, really new. And this is running on a five node setup. So yeah, it was just really, really new, 35 entries. It's validating, seems pretty well. Yeah, so far 100% of the attestations. And yeah, this is still like in developer machines, but hopefully you'll be able to connect and you'll start receiving keys for general machines.
I'm curious. Do you have? So obviously I've spent a lot of time with Rocket Pool. I'm very close to that community. It's I literally regard Rocket Pool as my darling LST. Do you have, or are there plans to target node operators that would effectively reduce the dominance of Lido rather than targeting Rocket Pool, which is aligned in the same direction as Diva?
Yeah, totally. There's been a current discussion, and I think it's going to become a DAO proposal soon. So the folks from Avantgarde proposed an early staker program, which allows people to deposit either ETH or STETH to kind of earn Diva incentives. And like, still needs to be decided how that will work. But if you have STETH or ETH and you want to deposit it here, you will start accruing Diva rewards. And basically, yeah, it's a super simple program where you don't need to do anything. It's more like deposit and signal support. I have been personally opposing adding our ETH because I don't want our communities to collide. So some people were like, "Oh, let's do this as well," but and like, yeah, we don't want to convert our ETH into Div ETH. We want a more diverse ecosystem. Like I would love to have pairs of our ETH versus our LSTs. And yeah, the idea here hopefully results in a bunch of people who have STEs, like different DAOs. If you look around, there's DAOs holding tens of thousands of STETH. And a lot of people are starting to ask, hey, can we place this here? Can we just park it and then turn it into DV? And yeah, hopefully that kind of takes a little bite and, well, more like takes a little bite and levels the ecosystem. But
Yeah.
so this is something that you'll be able to do soon if the vote passes, simply depositing and waiting.
I'm interpreting that that not inclusion of our ETH, and I know that people from different perspectives could interpret that differently, but I'm interpreting it as an intention not to vampire attack our ETH,
Totally,
but an intention to focus on onboarding STETH. It also, the other interpretation could be obviously that by locking out our ETH, it limits people who hold our ETH from participating and might cause them to consider purchasing STETH to participate. But I guess it comes from a lot of different angles. So yeah, okay.
That's a good point. And I wonder how we could do better. This is a proposal, so it's easy to add something to this. Avantgarde is the one proposing it. But yeah, I wonder if there's a good way to support that. I just personally, I didn't want to like people to deposit their existing RETH and then to convert that, because then you know, we're just moving from one diverse solution to another, and then the impact would be like not so positive.
Yeah, my big picture of all of these, I guess I would call them second generation LSTs, is that they work in the same direction to reduce the dominance of, you know, the large LST so that everyone thrives. And I see, or I believe that Diva is working in that direction. I like to poke to make sure that it's what I think it is. But my other question is about the node setup. What is so I see it, it's a Docker container. Is it, what's the installation process like for the Diva node?
Yeah, so it's super simple. I was really like pushing for that every time I spoke to a developer, but the process looks like this. I'm just showing like a kind of old demo here. The new one is a little nicer. But the process is you go, you fire up Docker, you do your Docker compose. So it pre-installs get and Teku at the moment, but that will be configurable later. And then it syncs. So once you're synced up, your web UI comes up. This will be your local machine. So you open your local machine. It says sign into the Diva operator. You can connect your wallet. In this case, it's checking the execution. Consensus clients are there. Coming early. Great. So if I continue, now this node is registered with the smart contract. And what happens then is that this is your UI. Like you're running one signer. You can join more validators by putting more collateral. And this doesn't have like, it has the advantage. So one issue that we have is it's hard to spin up a new validator because you have to go through the queue and there's an opportunity cost. And now people think, oh, well, I could just put this on an existing LST and get the yield rather than waiting. So then it creates a dilemma, right? So yeah, exactly. And one cool thing from this design is you deposit the LST from Diva. So in a way, it's kind of like restaking, but without all the like broader impact, because you already get the base thing. And then on top of that, you get the operator reward. So there's no waiting period. There's no opportunity cost. So if somebody wants to put all their ETH here, they could, and there would be no cost.
That's an interesting design. I've never considered. So if I'm staking Ether, I would first convert that to Diva ETH and then go to this interface and deposit.
That's right.
I have a kind of a silly question about this this interface. Is this a local interface, or is this does the local. Okay. And I've asked you this once before, but I don't recall the answer. Not today, I didn't ask, but obviously I run rocket pool nodes, and I've acknowledged that we don't want for Diva to vampire from rocket pool, but I think it's logical to assume that many people will be running both rocket pool and Diva nodes. Is there any additional setup, or is it streamlined to support that?
Yeah, so I would love people to run both, because honestly, if you have the skills for one, like it would be great to support both systems. Things that are similar is you could reuse the same Ethereum node for Rocket Pool and for Diva. It would take a large amount of validators to saturate that. The other thing is we connected to Prometheus, Grafana, and so on. So if you have monitoring set up, you can kind of track both in the same place. But after that, they're just regular validators, so you can like see all the info on them, and hopefully, yeah, hopefully it becomes super simple for people who don't have that many server skills. For me, the main thing though is the absence of stress. Like the idea that I can be offline for a few days,
Yeah.
and I would love to have systems here that maybe kick you out if you're offline for a few days, and then you can come in. So it's like, okay, I got kicked from the club, but I can enter again, so it's no big deal. So I
Are
would
you
love
able to see?
more kind of low
Are
stakes.
you able to see the you showed the graph earlier with 16 16 nodes operating on the one validator. So for my node, am I able to see a graph like this that shows my participation as well as my other signers?
So Iridian suggested that the other day, and we should really like it would be a cool feature that you could see it, because I think the fun of a validator is it's not just the money, it's knowing that you're participating. It would be cool to see which blocks do you produce, like where do you test, how are you ranking, who are you connected to? All that is insane.
I'm thinking of like knowing when it's okay for me to go offline. Like I would want to see that, you know, 14 of the other signers are online if I decide to go down for maintenance. But if only 11 of them are online, then I don't want to risk validation by taking my node down.
Yeah, I hear you. That it would be a concern, but the possibilities of that happening are so low. Like let's imagine 5% downtime, which is really bad. So if you have a one key setup, then you're down 5% of the time. But as you increase the set size in a 2 out of 3 supermajority, once you're at 4 or at 6, you're almost 100 times better.
Yeah.
So
well,
it would be so hard for that to happen.
I think that maybe fails to consider lazy node operators. People who, for whatever reason, like maybe they're not monitoring it, and they've gone offline for weeks and they don't know it, or maybe they've had a sync corruption and they are offline for a couple of weeks. I think without the awareness of the health of their node, it's easy to assume that someone else is doing the work. But if you can see it, then you know what the responsibility is. And maybe I'm just off in left field. I don't know.
No, you're absolutely right. But I would like to go one step further, and for you to not need that, because there's a concept, and this is far out on the right, but this concept is called resharing. And I really love this because resharing means if you lost a key, I'll make you a new one. In other words, if you're offline and you've been offline for 5 days, I'll kick you out.
Yeah.
And then somebody else will get the key, and somebody else will get the benefits. So you get a small penalty to discourage lazy validation. But like for me, the end system is that this is so resilient that it's kind of, like this network of mushrooms that you pull something out, exactly, self-healing, and it kind of regenerates.
I love that concept. There's another concept I am curious about, and we may be running out of time here. So Eigenlayer. I'm curious. I know that Eigenlayer is coming hot and heavy. A lot of people are interested in Eigenlayer. Some of us, while I like Sriram, I'm a fan of his intentions, I still have hesitations about the impact of Eigenlayer on the network. How and maybe it's not Eigenlayer, maybe it's some other restaking service. How does Diva interface with a potential restaking service?
So there's two ways that could potentially happen. And there's a way I really like, and there's a way, I guess I typed the wrong one, so I'll just show you with my hands. But the way I like is restaking could be a bet that you and I make. You say, hey, you're going to provide me this service, and if you don't do it, I will keep this collateral from you. Now that's just staking in a way, right? But the moment I give you an LST that has a positive yield, like potentially DV, then we're both winning from it, right? Because I'm making extra yield, maybe you get a cut, whatever. And that's not a systemic risk because that LST exists. And the question is whether you get part of it or I get it, but there's no systemic impact. The part that worries me, and maybe Suran has a brilliant answer to this, I don't know yet, but the part that worries me is when you start hardwiring it into validators, because now you're playing with the kind of biology of the ecosystem and you're kind of deeply integrating it. And if anything goes wrong, then it ends up affecting the host. And I'm really worried about that. Maybe again, I need to understand it better, but I would prefer a world where we have LSTs as collateral and everything's kind of a zero-sum game between party A and party B, because I think that's completely safe. Does that make sense?
It does. It does make sense. I don't know if I heard the answer. And I think to simplify the question, is Diva interested or likely to integrate eigenlayer, or is it restaking agnostic?
For now, we don't have any plans. I think ideally we should be agnostic and not support it internally, so people can use the LST if they want. Like eigenlayer now accepts our ETH and it's ETH. So if they want to accept it, great. It's not connected to our system. It's isolated from the client. That's perfect. If we were to integrate it, I would have to understand it a lot better because today I'm a little nervous about the risks.
Yeah, we got close to one of these topics about governance. There's, I obviously come to staking from a beacon chain health approach, and I think that we have a lot in common there. Like our ultimate goal is the success of the beacon chain, but there's also this idea that governance, and you showed the poll from Lido earlier about whether they should limit, and 99.99% of the governance tokens voted not to limit. Do you one of my concerns for Diva has kind of become this concern that coin governors aren't necessarily committed to the health of the beacon chain. They are generally committed to economic success. Do you have ideas how those economic actors can be incentivized to interact with Diva and still promote the health of the beacon chain?
The incentives is the hard part. I put a lot of thoughts into the limits. Like I think there should be a safety limit where you're not allowed to cross it with governance, and that bridge is burnt, so nobody can override it because it would be unsafe. But I still need to think more about the incentives. Like, I mean, I work in the foundation, so as a foundation, we can incentivize that, promote it, but how can you really make it part of governance from the token? Do you have any ideas? Have you thought about this?
It's a struggle for me. It's recognizing that disconnect between token holders and the health of the beacon chain, because token holders don't benefit from the health of the beacon chain. They benefit from the increased value of the token. And that I don't know how to now I don't have good ideas about how to balance that out, because ideally for me, token holders are most successful when the protocol that they work with improves decentralization of the beacon chain. But the problem is decentralization is expensive. And so it's not monetarily positive to support decentralization. It's monetarily positive to centralize. So no, I don't have an answer for that, but I'm actively thinking about it.
It's really interesting. But one idea might be to kind of try to attract the kind of people who are value driven enough that they will look for a balance and not just profit maximizing. And I think the way Diva did the airdrop, selecting a lot of like early stakers, like the very early people, or people who run multiple nodes, people who are really active in governance, and trying to farm out any airdrop farmers and things like that. I think that's good, but I think it will be an effort to keep the quality of community that keeps each other accountable. So yeah,
there's
It's gonna
something to be
be
said for
it's gonna be an
the
effort.
character of a community. That's, I think, what you're getting to.
Yeah.
If the airdrop recipients represent a community whose values are focused on the health of the beacon chain, then maybe that will define the community. I don't know. I'm just kind of musing on it.
Yeah, for sure.
So the test is inbound. Can you, as we wrap up, can you give me an idea what we're looking forward to next? What are we going to hear from Diva?
Yeah. So in a matter of days, the testnet should be ready and packaged. So what you should look forward to is a cute little nice Docker image. You can be part of the first test that we ever do. And after that, what I would love to see is people in different countries testing this, having really diverse setups. And after that, I would love for the community to step up and to start organizing like more maybe goal-driven testnets and like see what we can complete, the kind of tools we can build around it. How can we make this into the smallest possible machine that anyone can put home? So yeah, we have a few months ahead, but if you're an operator, sign into our Discord or Telegram channels. You can find us in, maybe I'll share screen for a second, but Twitter is a great resource. We have a Telegram channel with announcements and the Discord. So I encourage you to follow whatever feels right for you, and kind of within a day or two, there should be news about this. You will be able to spin off your own validators to see how that performs, who you're connected to. And yeah, super excited to actually have people using it soon.
My hope is to kind of do these with you at a regular cadence. I don't know what that cadence will be, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly, but I'm excited enough about it, and I have a strong enough desire to improve that decentralization that I definitely want to support wherever I can.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would love to be guided as well. So if there's anything you think would be super impactful, that's my job. So just let me know, and we'll like make videos, tutorials, workshops, whatever it is.
Awesome. William, you've been listening the whole time. Do you have ideas, questions, anything you'd like to get off your mind real quick?
I think he's covered everything pretty in depth today.
Great. Pablo, William, thank you guys for your time. We'll throw this up on YouTube and share it around. All right, guys. Thank you.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Cool. Later,
Thanks
guys.
so much.